an emblem of Western decadence. Today, 80% of Russians say they're Orthodox, but few are likely to surrender relatively newfound freedoms or fashions. Neve Barker, AlJazeera, Moscow.
In Western Canada, the proposed logging of an ancient forest with a blockbuster name has sparked a campaign to protect the area. The provincial government of British Columbia is distancing itself from plans to cut Avatar Grove, but environmental groups say that's not enough. MTS Tiab reports.
This is Avatar Grove, a range of red cedars and Douglas firs that have been standing here for between 500 and 1,000 years. The environmental campaigner Ken Wu discovered the site while exploring for ancient trees over a year ago, giving it its now widely used name, inspired by the Hollywood blockbuster when he found it was earmarked for logging. Wu says the plight of the fictitious planet isn't too dissimilar to what's happening here.
Avatar, in large part, is about saving old-growth forests on an alien planet. And we realized that we have an incredible rainforest here on Earth that needs protecting.
The province of British Columbia is one of the few places in the world that has such massive and ancient forests. Its government is also one of the few that allows for the commercial logging of such trees. Environmentalists say if policy isn't changed, this is what's left. Nearly 5 million hectares of BC's forests over 140 years old are protected by the province. But with over 95 million hectares of forest land in total, environmental groups say that isn't enough. The plight of Avatar Grove has attracted tens of thousands, and after the province of BC's own independent forestry oversight body urged officials to spare the range of ancient trees, the government appears to be listening.
I do think that the public's calling out for better mechanisms to manage our forests. We've continued to do that, and I think as a government we've got lots of examples. Is there more work to do? There's always going to be more work to do.
The logging company with rights to cut Avatar Grove are now indicating they won't. Environmental groups say public pressure is to thank, but add millions of other hectares of ancient growth forests in BC also need saving. Imtiaz Tayyab, AlJazeera, Vancouver Island, British Columbia.
This is Al Jazeera, and these are the stories making headlines. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi has told a French newspaper that he wants the United Nations or the African Union to investigate the uprising in his country. Meanwhile, rebel fighters are said to be heading towards the Libyan town of Sirte. That's Gaddafi's hometown, and it's expected to be well defended. The rebels have moved on from the key oil port of Ras Lanuf, where they claim full control. Saudi Arabia has banned all demonstrations after a series of minor protests in the oil-producing eastern province. Mainly Shia demonstrators gathered in the towns of Qatif and Hofuf on Thursday and Friday. They've been demanding the release of all prisoners being held without trial, as well as better access to jobs. In Egypt, thousands of protesters have stormed the state security offices in Cairo. They claim officials inside were trying to shred sensitive documents containing evidence of human rights abuses committed by the former regime. The head of the African Union, Jean Ping, met the internationally recognized leader of Côte d'Ivoire, Alassane Ouattara, on Saturday. The United Nations is to reinforce its peacekeeping force there by 2,000 soldiers and 2 combat helicopters. Witnesses in Gaza say Israel launched at least 4 air raids on the Strip on Saturday. There were also reports of a rocket being fired from the Gaza Strip into southern Israel. There were no casualties in the attacks. A statement from the Israeli army said the air raids were aimed at terrorist targets. In Cuba, an American man accused of seeking to undermine the government has been found guilty. Alan Gross was arrested in December 2009 for smuggling communications equipment into Cuba as part of the USAID-backed democracy program. U.S. officials and Gross's family insist he has done nothing wrong. He now faces 20 years in jail. Cuba says the USAID programs are aimed at overthrowing the government of President Raul Castro. In India's financial capital, Mumbai, thousands of people have lost their homes after a fire engulfed the Garib Nagar slum near Bandra railway station. Among them, Rubina Ali, one of the child stars of the film Slumdog Millionaire. The area is home to around 10,000 people. Ireland's 2 main parties have agreed to form a coalition, the centre-right Fine Gael party and the centre-left Labour Party, were the two big winners after last week's general election. The leader of Fine Gael, Enda Kenny, is all set to be the next Prime Minister. He says he will renegotiate the terms of last year's $113 billion EU-IMF loan. Those are the headlines. Frost Over the World is next.
Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World, and a programme which is, naturally, dominated by the continuing unrest in North Africa and the Middle East. We'll be hearing from a leading pro-democracy activist in Yemen, a voice that's rarely heard, and from the head of the UN Refugee Commission, who is at the heart of this crisis in the Middle East and in North Africa, trying to deal with the humanitarian crisis on Libya's borders. But we begin with the increasing calls for international intervention in Libya. One of the most powerful voices calling for this form of military action, and in particular for a no-fly zone over Libya, is that of the former US presidential candidate, John McCain. He joins me now from Washington. John, you've been speaking firmly in the last few days about the advantages of a no-fly zone option. How would that work, and, well, do you think it would work?
Well, first of all, David, you would declare it, which would have in my view, a very salutary effect on the Libyan pilots. As you know, there are severe questions about the morale and loyalty of people like that. Two of them have already flown to Malta, as you know, and there is certainly some doubt as to whether they would fly for fear that sooner or later they would be shot down. Second of all, we have assets in the region. We have an aircraft carrier. We have bases in Italy and in Sicily, as you know, and we could work with our allies. The British Prime Minister and the French President have been very strong on this issue. And most importantly, everything I'm hearing out of Libya on the part of the people who are seeking freedom from Gaddafi's rule, they're asking for it. They're asking to be protected from air attacks, and that's an understandable desire.
And in terms of making that approach and responding to that, I mean, how many other countries would be involved in this situation, do you think, John?
Well, again, the British and the French have been very supportive. Others have. I'm not averse to going to NATO, but I also think that the United States could say, look, this is a situation where people are being massacred or attempted to being massacred by Gaddafi. He has clearly threatened all kinds of things that would happen rather than him leave power. And so there's a lot of ways, if you